my boss, and a moral jerk at the same time, constantly humiliated me and told me to be grateful that he paid me at all. Later, he even asked me to hire him. I realized something was wrong the moment Mark Sullivan looked straight through me, as if I were a reflection on the glass behind him instead of a living, breathing woman standing 3 feet away. It was my first morning at Horizon Tech, and I had barely stepped into his office before I felt myself disappear. "Emily Carter," I introduced myself, extending a hand I immediately regretted. He didn't shake it, didn't even glance at it. His eyes flicked to his monitor, then to a scattered pile of envelopes on his desk. "Yeah, new hire. Sit anywhere," he muttered, already typing again. "Take these to the mailroom." He slid the stack of envelopes toward me with a casual shove of his elbow. Never mind that I had walked in expecting a real welcome, maybe even a short meeting about my role. After all, I had gone through 3 interviews, a skills assessment, and 2 reference checks. Horizon Tech promised growth, mentorship, creativity. But Mark didn't say a word about my department, my duties, or what he expected from me. He simply pushed the envelopes closer, waiting. I forced a polite smile. "Sure, I can take care of this, but I was hoping we could go over my later," he said, cutting me off. "I'm busy." Then he waved his hand in a lazy, dismissive flick that told me exactly how much he valued my presence here. I walked out holding the envelopes, trying to breathe past the sudden tightness in my throat. The hallway hummed with fluorescent lights and muffled voices. It smelled like printer ink and overused carpet, a sterile corporate scent I had once found comforting because it meant structure and purpose. Now it smelled like something else entirely, the beginning of disappointment. Still, I tried to shake it off. First days were awkward. Maybe Mark was stressed or running late or just not a morning person. I told myself not to take it personally, but being invisible, that was harder to ignore. As I found the mailroom, down 2 hallways and past a cluster of cubicles where people tapped away on laptops, I caught a glimpse of the real Horizon Tech. Sleek white desks, glass meeting rooms, the buzz of collaboration. A group of co-workers laughed together as they passed around a tablet, pointing at something on the screen. Their energy was contagious. I felt myself wanting to belong to it. After dropping off the envelopes, I returned to find that my assigned desk sat in the far corner of the floor, wedged between a filing cabinet and a printer that sounded like it was dying every time someone used it. The chair wobbled. The monitor was dusty, but I reminded myself, it's fine. Everyone starts somewhere. I spent the next hour waiting for someone, anyone, to give me direction. Mark didn't come by. My teammates barely acknowledged me except for a quick nod or a faint smile. Most of them seemed wrapped up in meetings, presentations, design sessions. I recognized a few faces from the interview process, people who had told me how much the department needed new strategic thinkers. Yet here I was, refreshing my inbox every few minutes, wondering if I was supposed to just sit. Eventually, Mark appeared at my desk without warning, dropping a stack of old documents onto my keyboard. "These need sorting," he said, "by date. Don't mix them up." I reached for the pile. "Okay, but should I also be reviewing any current projects? I was told I'd be working on analytics for the—" "Did I ask you to?" Mark snapped. My mouth closed. His expression didn't shift. He simply turned and walked away, leaving me with papers that smelled like they belonged in a basement. As I sorted through the dusty stack, I kept glancing at the other employees. They were discussing numbers, designing visuals, planning rollouts, talking strategy, real work, meaningful work. Work I knew I could do, work I had trained for, dreamed of. But no one looked at me, No one asked my thoughts. No one even asked how my first day was going. By lunchtime, I had eaten a sandwich alone at my desk. By late afternoon, my head ached from the endless flicker of the dying printer beside me. When Mark returned to drop off an unassembled box of brochures for me to fold, he didn't even bother saying hello. The worst part wasn't the trivial tasks. It was the feeling of being erased. At 5:30, when the office started emptying, I stayed behind for a moment, staring at my reflection in the black monitor screen. My eyes looked tired already, but beneath the fatigue there was something else. A spark. A refusal. I whispered to myself, "This isn't where my story ends." Because if Horizon Tech thought I came here just to disappear under a mountain of busy work, they had no idea who I truly was, or what I was capable of. And one day soon, they were going to see me, even if I had to force them to. By my second week at Horizon Tech, I had learned an uncomfortable truth. People didn't need to tell you that you were unimportant. They simply treated you that way. And Mark Sullivan was a master at it. Every morning I arrived early, hoping to find a real assignment waiting for me. Something that required thought, insight, maybe even a spreadsheet that wasn't 3 years old. But each day began the same. A new pile of tedious chores left on my desk like offerings to the gods of monotony. "Emily, the file room is a mess," Mark would say as he swept past me, barely slowing down. "Fix it." Or, "Run these documents to legal." Or, my personal favorite, "The shredder's jammed. Handle it." He never looked at me when giving these orders. He talked to the air, to the wall, to the space around me. It was remarkable how efficiently someone could erase another human being without saying a cruel word. By the end of the second week, my daily tasks included organizing old paper archives, printing hundreds of pages for other departments, labeling folders, restocking office supplies, delivering coffee, and feeding confidential documents into the shredder until my fingertips felt coated in microscopic paper dust. I could list every smell of the office by then: hot toner, stale paper, floor cleaner, and the sour breath of the shredder when it overheated. Meanwhile, the team around me thrived. I watched them brainstorm with energy and confidence. They built presentations on large screens with animated charts, shared insights, laughed over breakthroughs. They spoke in the language I had spent years learning: KPIs, forecasting, comparative analytics, but never directed a single question my way. More than once, I caught snippets of conversation about strategic expansion models, pricing optimization, and client retention. Everything I had trained for. Everything I could have contributed to if anyone had bothered to ask. But I was the girl with the box of old files. One afternoon, as I dragged a stack of dusty binders from the storage room, 2 coworkers walked past the open doorway. They didn't notice me at first, so their conversation came through unfiltered. "Poor thing," one whispered. "Mark's already turned her into his assistant." "She's not even an assistant," the other replied. "She's, I don't know, a runner? Whatever he needs at the moment. She seems smart, though. Doesn't matter. If Mark doesn't like you, you're done." Their voices faded as they continued down the hall, leaving me frozen with a binder in my arms and a new ache in my chest. It wasn't just that people saw what was happening, it was that no one planned to help. They had all learned the unspoken rule: stay out of Mark's way and don't get involved. I finished shelving the binders, feeling as though I were stacking pieces of myself into old metal cabinets. That same day, Mark stopped by my desk with a plastic container. "Conference room needs water bottles," he said. "Make it happen quickly." I stared at the container, confused. "Shouldn't facilities—" He didn't answer. He didn't even turn around. He was already gone. So I carried the water bottles to the conference room where a meeting was underway. Through the glass wall, I could see my team deep in discussion around a glowing projection of quarterly revenue charts. Ideas ricocheted around the table. Someone pointed to a graph. Someone else shook their head in disagreement. Real work was happening. Work I understood. Work I craved. I opened the door quietly. No one looked at me except for a brief, awkward glance from a junior analyst who moved his chair so I could slide by. I placed the bottles on the counter and slipped out, invisible again. The moment I left the meeting, a strange heaviness settled in my stomach. A mix of envy and something darker. Fear, maybe. The fear that this was all I would ever be here. That I had entered a place where ambition went to die under a mountain of copy paper and discarded staples. But that night, long after most people had gone home, something shifted. I was running a final batch of documents through the shredder when the machine jammed again, coughing up half-chewed pages. I knelt down to clear the blades, and as I worked, the building around me quieted. The lights dimmed. The distant hum of computers dropped into silence, and in that quiet, something inside me steadied. I wasn't going to let this become my reality, not permanently, not forever. As I cleaned the shredder, I whispered to myself, "This is temporary. I'm learning the system. I'm watching. And when the moment comes, I'll be ready." It wasn't bravado. It wasn't some cinematic declaration. It was a promise, one that settled deep into my bones. Because while everyone saw me sorting files, printing packets, and fetching water, they didn't see the fire building behind the scenes. They didn't know what I was capable of. Not yet. But they would. Soon. I didn't mean to overhear the conversation. Honestly, I didn't. But Horizon Tech's break room had terrible acoustics, and when people talked near the coffee machine, their voices bounced off the walls like rubber balls. That morning, I was stirring powdered creamer into my cup when 2 analysts from my department entered, chatting casually. "And then HR corrected it," one said. "Turns out Jenna's raise kicked in last cycle. She's at 78 now." "Nice," the other replied. "I'm still at 68. What about you?" 72. I froze mid-stir. 78? 72? Even 68? My salary was 52. $52,000. It wasn't nothing, but compared to the numbers they were tossing around, it felt like a punch to the ribs. The analysts continued without noticing me. "What about the new girl?" one asked. "Emily. Something?" The other snorted softly. "Oh, she's at the bottom. I saw the onboarding sheet. She's the lowest in the department. Even the interns get a better hourly equivalent." They both laughed, not cruelly, just thoughtlessly. Then they left, carrying their coffees and their comfortable salaries with them. I stood alone in the suddenly too bright break room, fingers tightening around my cup. Lowest in the department. Even the interns. A hot rush of humiliation climbed up my neck. I told myself there had to be a mistake. HR must have misfiled something. Or maybe my position had been categorized differently. It didn't make sense. My degree, my certifications, my work experience. I should have been competitive. Average, at least. Not scraping the bottom of the barrel. By noon, I had worked up the courage to talk to Mark. He was at his desk, typing with the intensity of someone pretending to be busy. I stood in the doorway, hands clasped behind me, rehearsing my words. "Mark, do you have a moment?" He didn't look up. "What now?" My throat tightened, but I pushed forward. "I just wanted to discuss my salary. I found out I'm being paid significantly less than others in my role. I was hoping we could review." He cut me off with a sharp laugh. Not a friendly one, Not even a surprised one. More like the sound someone makes when they find a joke unworthy of their time. Emily, be grateful you're getting anything at all. The words hit like a slap. He finally looked up, annoyance carved into every line of his face. You've been here what? 3 weeks? He said. You do basic tasks, file sorting, errands, admin cleanup. Why would you think you're worth more than what you're getting? I swallowed hard. Because those aren't the tasks I was hired for. I have experience with analytics, strategy, forecasting. I've been hoping to contribute more. He raised a hand, palm forward, silencing me. Let me make something clear. You are not here to contribute strategy. You're here to lighten my load. You want more pay? Earn it. Until then, don't waste my time. I stood frozen, heat flooding my face, anger, embarrassment, disbelief all tangled together. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Mark had already turned back to his screen, dismissing me with the ease of someone closing a tab they didn't care about. I forced myself to breathe steadily. I understand, I said quietly. But I didn't understand. Not even close. By the time I reached my desk, the weight of his words had settled like wet sand in my chest. It wasn't just his refusal. People got denied raises all the time. It was how he said it. Like my existence was an inconvenience. Like I should feel lucky to earn anything, despite being overworked, underpaid, and invisible. For the rest of the day, my tasks felt heavier. Every stack of papers, every trip to the printer, every meaningless chore carried the echo of his voice. Be grateful. Useless. Lighten my load. By the time I got home that evening, I felt wrung out. I tossed my bag onto the couch and sank into a chair, staring at the wall as the day replayed in my mind. The humiliating laughter in the break room, Mark's dismissive smirk, the realization that no one in that building saw my worth. But underneath the sting, something else churned. Anger. Not reckless anger, not the kind that lashes out blindly. A sharper, quieter anger, the kind that sharpens resolve instead of destroying it. It whispered to me, "He's wrong about you." I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating the dim apartment. My resume sat in a folder on the desktop. My certificates, my unfinished ideas, my saved articles on business strategy. I clicked open a blank document. If Horizon Tech wasn't going to recognize my value, then I would force them to. I would build something undeniable, something they couldn't ignore, bury, or hand off to someone else. Something so effective, so well crafted, so essential that even Mark Sullivan couldn't pretend I didn't exist. I cracked my knuckles, exhaled, and started typing. Because I wasn't going to let a man like him define my worth. Not now, not ever. Every night, after the office drained of voices and fluorescent buzz and Mark's constant shadow, I went home to a different world, one where I wasn't invisible. Not to myself, at least. The moment I closed the apartment door behind me, I shed the exhaustion of Horizon Tech like a heavy coat. I kicked off my shoes, microwaved something edible enough to pass for dinner, and opened my laptop. This became my ritual. While most people decompressed with TV shows or mindless scrolling, I dove into a private curriculum, one of my own creation. Strategy books piled up on my desk, highlighters tucked between their pages like bookmarks of determination. I enrolled in online business courses, devoured lectures from CEOs, watched long-winded presentations on corporate structure and crisis management. I took notes obsessively. I built spreadsheets just to keep my mind sharp. All the skills Mark claimed I didn't have, I was sharpening them nightly. Some evenings, I revisited Horizon Tech's public reports, tracing patterns the analysts hadn't mentioned in meetings. I studied the company's product pipeline, the flaws in its client outreach, the weaknesses in its pricing strategy. I saw holes, big ones, places where the company was bleeding money without realizing it. Weeks earlier, I wouldn't have dared believe I could craft something meaningful. But Mark's condescension had triggered something stubborn in me, something fiery. Every dismissive comment, every trivial assignment, every humiliating moment pushed me further. I wasn't going to stay powerless. One night, close to midnight, I stared at a blank slide on my screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I had gathered data for weeks. I had theories, concepts, observations. But now it was time to turn them into something real. A project, a solution, an idea big enough to change everything. I started with a title, Horizon Tech Recovery and Optimization Framework. It sounded dramatic, maybe even arrogant, but it felt right. Because I wasn't building a minor suggestion. I was constructing an entire structural overhaul, a long-term strategy that simplified operations, improved client retention, and closed the profit leak I had discovered in the company's logistics division. I divided the plan into phases, outlining risks and responses. I drafted emergency pathways Horizon Tech could activate during major client disputes or unexpected financial shifts. I built scenarios and solutions, testing them using dummy data. I even created a predictive model using what I remembered from college statistics courses. Hours passed without me noticing. My apartment was silent except for the clicking of keys and the buzz of my monitor. At 2:14 a.m., I looked up and realized I had built the foundation of something powerful. I saved the file, leaned back, and exhaled. But building the project wasn't enough. I needed to be better, smarter, sharper, stronger. So I kept studying. I took a course on negotiation, another on leadership, another on crisis intervention. My notebooks filled quickly with scribbles, diagrams, highlighted phrases. I mapped out how Horizon Tech handled clients and how they should be handling them. I examined how the board made decisions, how the CEO structured operations. The more I learned, the clearer it became. Horizon Tech wasn't broken, but it was shaky, and no one noticed how close it hovered to the edge. No one except me. At work, nothing changed. Mark still dumped busy work on my desk. My coworkers still saw me as the girl with the shredder. My salary remained the lowest. The disrespect remained constant. But something inside me was changing. Quietly. Steadily. On the outside, I filed papers. On the inside, I built empires. One night, 3 weeks into my personal training program, I sat in bed with my laptop open, staring at a nearly completed 37-slide presentation. Every slide was clean, logical, and backed with evidence. It wasn't perfect yet. Some graphs needed smoothing, and a few calculations had to be double-checked, but the idea was there. Solid. Sound. It could save the company millions. Maybe more. It could prove me capable once and for all. A small, reluctant smile tugged at my lips. Mark would hate this, I whispered to myself, because if he ever saw it, he wouldn't be able to deny it. He wouldn't be able to tell me I was useless. He wouldn't be able to shove envelopes toward me and pretend that was all I could handle. No, the project would force everyone to see what I had become. Not a runner, not an errand girl, not invisible, but a strategist, a builder, a mind worth listening to. Of course, I had no intention of showing it yet. Timing mattered. If I spoke too soon, Mark would crush it before it took its first breath. He was good at that, suffocating potential. So I waited, watching, learning, gathering more information. In the silence of my apartment, I whispered something that surprised even me. When the moment comes, it's going to change everything. It wasn't wishful thinking. It was a promise. And for the first time since joining Horizon Tech, I felt something fierce and hopeful growing in my chest. Not just ambition, but certainty. Some people say humiliation feels like heat, like fire spreading across your skin. For me, it felt cold, icy, paralyzing, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones and stays there long after the moment has passed. The worst part? I saw it coming. It started when Mark sent out an email announcing a mandatory strategy meeting with the full department for Monday morning. My heart raced when the message appeared in my inbox. A strategy meeting? That was the world I had been studying in secret every night, the world I wanted to enter more than anything. I imagined myself contributing, just one idea, one smart suggestion, something small but meaningful. I spent the weekend preparing, not rehearsing speeches or anything dramatic, just refreshing knowledge, reviewing my notes, reminding myself that I belonged in that room. But the moment I stepped into the conference room, optimism drained from me. The team filled the table, analysts, project managers, senior staff. I hovered near the back, unsure whether I was allowed to sit. Mark glanced at me briefly and motioned toward the corner. "Stand or sit against the wall," he said under his breath. "You're not presenting anything." My cheeks warmed, but I nodded and moved to the wall. I didn't care about the seat. I just wanted the chance to be heard. For the first 20 minutes, the team reviewed quarterly losses and client disputes. Horizon Tech's numbers were slipping, slowly but consistently. People threw out suggestions, surface-level fixes, bandages for deep wounds. I listened closely, mentally comparing their ideas to the project I had been building at home. My solution addressed every flaw they mentioned, plus several they hadn't detected yet. My fingers twitched at my sides. I could practically see where my project would fit in the presentation, how it would strengthen the weak points in their plan. Maybe I could speak up. Finally, during a lull in the discussion, I lifted my hand. Not high, not dramatically, just enough. I waited. At first, no one looked at me. Then one of the analysts glanced over and nudged Mark. Mark didn't hide his irritation. "What?" he snapped. I cleared my throat. "I have a thought about the client retention issue. I've been observing some trends and—" "Emily," he interrupted loudly so the entire room could hear. "This isn't about shredding papers or delivering coffee. This is a strategy meeting." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Someone looked down at their notepad. Another bit their lip. I felt the first ice-cold sting creep up my spine. "I know," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I've been studying the numbers, and I think there's a larger pattern." Mark barked a laugh. A real laugh. "Oh, please. You think you've analyzed the numbers? You barely know what the numbers mean." I opened my mouth, but he raised his hand again, slicing the air like a blade. "No, stop. This is not the time for whatever you're doing." My stomach tightened. The cold spread deeper. "I just wanted to share, and I'm telling you no." He turned to the team. "We don't need input from someone who hasn't touched a real project since she got here. Let's move on." A ripple of murmurs spread across the table. Someone coughed into their sleeve. I wished the floor would open and swallow me whole. But Mark wasn't finished. In front of everyone, co-workers, managers, senior analysts, he added, "Emily is here to assist me, not to pretend she's part of the strategy division." A harsh silence settled over the room. I felt all eyes flick toward me, some sympathetic, some confused, some indifferent. They all saw me, not as the person I was working so hard to become, but as the caricature Mark had drawn. The girl with no value, the girl who did the boring stuff, the girl who should stay quiet. The cold inside me crystallized. I lowered my hand. My voice, when I found it again, was barely a whisper. Understood. Mark waved dismissively and continued the meeting as though nothing had happened. As though he hadn't just crushed weeks of quiet effort with a few careless sentences. I stood there for the remaining hour, hands clasped behind my back, every minute feeling like an hour. A part of me wanted to run out of the room. Another part wanted to scream. But I did neither. When the meeting ended, people filed past me. A few avoided eye contact. One offered a small, apologetic smile. But no one said anything. No one challenged Mark. No one stood up for me. I was the invisible girl again. Except now, I wasn't just invisible. I was publicly diminished. I walked back to my desk slowly, each step weighed down with humiliation. When I sat down, I stared at the monitor without seeing anything. My ears rang. My chest felt too tight. But underneath all that shame, something else stirred. A spark. Not hope. Not yet. Anger. Not fiery and loud, but silent and contained. Anger that carved itself into resolve. If Mark wanted me to be a nobody, then he had no idea what he had just unleashed. I turned on my computer, opened the project I'd been building in secret, and highlighted the title, Horizon Tech Recovery and Optimization Framework. I whispered to myself, "You're wrong about me." And for the first time, I believed it completely. The building felt different that morning. Noisy, frantic, tense in a way I had never experienced before. Horizon Tech usually started slow, easing into the day with soft keyboard tapping and casual chatter near the elevators. But not today. Today, the air practically vibrated with panic. I sensed it the moment I stepped off the elevator. People rushed past me, talking too quickly, clutching folders, holding phones to their ears. The printers screeched nonstop. A cluster of managers huddled in the hallway, whispering urgently. It felt like stumbling into the middle of a storm without knowing where the lightning had struck. I reached my desk and noticed something unusual. Mark was already there. He never arrived earlier than 9. It wasn't laziness, it was arrogance. But now he stood rigidly beside my desk, jaw clenched, sweat visible near his temple. His tie hung crooked like he'd dressed in a hurry. "Emily!" he barked. My heart jumped. "Yes?" He shoved a stack of messy papers toward me. "Sort these by client category, fast." "What's happening?" I asked, glancing around the frantic office. "Just do it," he snapped. Then he stormed off, nearly colliding with a passing analyst. I stared after him, anxiety prickling at my ribs. The worst part was that he wasn't the only one acting like something was on fire. Everyone was. I leaned over the cubicle wall toward Jenna, the analyst who sat 2 rows down. She looked pale, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "What's going on?" I whispered. She didn't look up. "You didn't hear? The Trident contract is collapsing. Completely collapsing." I blinked. "I thought Trident was our biggest client." "It is," she said, voice tight. "Which is why everyone is freaking out. If they pull out, Horizon Tech loses millions. Maybe more." My stomach dropped. Trident was the backbone of the company's revenue. Losing them would be catastrophic, not just financially, but reputationally. Other clients would panic. Investors would bail. A chain reaction could unfold faster than anyone could stop it. How did it happen?" I asked. "No one knows yet. There's a data discrepancy, something huge. Trident claims we delivered incomplete reports. They've already pulled their renewal agreement until further notice." I swallowed hard. I had seen the gaps in Horizon Tech's system during my research at home, the outdated logistics tracking, the inconsistencies in how certain departments stored their project data. The flaws had been obvious to me, even as an outsider. Yet the people in charge had brushed past them for years, and now the consequences were unfolding in real time. All day, the office trembled under the pressure. Mark jumped from desk to desk, barking orders, flinging blame like confetti. Senior managers argued openly in the hallways. People exchanged terrified looks, the kind that said, "I picked a really bad week to work here." I sorted files like he asked, but my mind wasn't on the papers. It was cycling through everything I had studied. Patterns, spreadsheets, performance charts, my own project. The solution I'd been crafting addressed these exact weaknesses. I had built protocols for data validation, crisis response models, logistical restructuring. The disaster unfolding around me wasn't random. It was predictable, preventable, fixable. A few times, I tried approaching Mark, but he brushed me off with a sharp shake of his head. "Not now, Emily?" Or worse, "Go do something useful, like organize the supply closet." Meanwhile, the crisis deepened. Around lunchtime, the executive board initiated a full emergency meeting. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving the rest of the department to panic in the open. People whispered about layoffs, restructuring, possible bankruptcy. The word liquidation floated through the air like a ghost. By mid-afternoon, the atmosphere had curdled into despair. The meeting had dragged on for hours, and nobody had emerged with good news. A rumor began circulating that the board was preparing a statement to the stockholders. A very bad sign. I watched people pacing, rubbing their temples, clutching paper cups like lifelines. The entire floor felt like a sinking ship. Finally, near 5 o'clock, the conference room door burst open. The executives filtered out, grim-faced and exhausted. Some looked pale, some looked furious, none looked hopeful. Mark appeared moments later, his eyes wild with stress. He stopped in the center of the floor and shouted, "We need solutions, real solutions! If we don't fix this by tomorrow, we're done!" People froze. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. A few analysts stepped forward, hesitating before offering shaky suggestions, none of which landed. None addressed the actual problem. Mark rejected each one with increasing desperation. "No," he barked. "That won't work. Too slow. Completely useless." I felt a flame ignite inside me. I knew exactly what the solution was. I had spent weeks building it, refining it, testing it. It wasn't guesswork. It was a plan. A real plan. My plan. My heart pounded as I took a step forward. My voice, though quiet, cut through the buzz. "I have an idea." A dozen heads turned. Mark froze and slowly pivoted toward me. His eyes narrowed, already sharpening into cruelty. Before I could speak another word, he snapped, "Not now, Emily. This is a crisis, not a training session. Go back to whatever trivial thing you were doing." Laughter, small, nervous but real, bubbled from the back of the room. Something in my chest twisted painfully. I felt invisible again, silenced, dismissed. But this time, the crisis swirling around us whispered something louder. "You're the only one who knows the answer." And whether Mark liked it or not, I wasn't done. Not even close. By the next morning, the panic had curdled into something heavier. Resignation. People moved through the office like they were walking underwater, slow and weighted, as if each step brought them closer to the disaster waiting at their desks. The Trident contract hadn't just collapsed overnight, it had detonated. Emails from other clients were rolling in with tense questions. investors were demanding explanations. The board scheduled another emergency meeting for noon. I watched it all unfold with a strange mixture of dread and clarity. Every piece of this crisis matched the breakdowns I had mapped out at home. The fragile communication channels, the outdated data transfer methods, the gaps in verification, everything I had been studying for weeks. My project didn't just address these issues, it solved them. It plugged every hole Horizon Tech had ignored. Yet I was still being treated like a background prop. Around 10 o'clock, Mark gathered the entire department again. His face was red, his sleeves rolled up, his hair sticking out in directions that suggested he hadn't slept. People settled miserably into their seats, and I took my familiar place against the wall. "We are one step away from total collapse," Mark announced, slamming a folder onto the table. "The board wants a solution by today, not tomorrow. Today. If we don't fix this, they will intervene. And trust me, you do not want the board handling cleanup." Murmurs rippled through the room. Eyes darted nervously. I felt the air tighten. "Now," Mark continued, "we are brainstorming. No bad ideas. Just give me anything we can use." "No bad ideas," he said. "Except mine, apparently." The team threw out suggestions: patch the data manually, send Trident an apology package, reset the delivery timeline. None of it addressed the real problem. None of it would work. After the fourth useless suggestion, I couldn't hold back anymore. I stepped forward, voice steady. "I have a complete solution that addresses the data discrepancy, repairs the communication gap, and provides a new workflow to stabilize the pipeline. I've been working on it outside of my regular tasks." Every head turned toward me, but for once, I didn't shrink. I continued, "It's a comprehensive framework. I've modeled the risks, fixed the structural issues, and—" Mark cut me off with a sharp exhale. "Oh, for God's sake!" The room fell silent. He turned fully to me, irritation twisting his mouth. "Emily, this is an emergency meeting, a serious meeting. We are not discussing your side hobbies." My heart thudded. This isn't a hobby. It's a solution, a full one. I can explain it. "No," he snapped, louder this time. "Absolutely not." He stepped closer, as if proximity alone would silence me. "Do you hear yourself? You, who files papers and fetches supplies, think you've built a major strategy model overnight? Come on, don't waste our time." "It wasn't overnight," I said quietly. "I've been working on it for weeks." That made him laugh. Actually laugh. A cruel, disbelieving sound. "Right. You, working on strategy. Emily, just go back to the shredder or whatever you were doing before you decided to interrupt the real work." A few people chuckled nervously. Others looked away. My face burned, but I didn't lower my eyes. "Let me show you the model," I insisted. "Just give me 5 minutes. I promise it ties everything together. It can fix the Trident issue and prevent future ones." Mark snapped, "Enough!" The sound ricocheted off the glass walls. "You are not qualified," he continued. "You are not trained. You are not part of this conversation. Stop inserting yourself where you don't belong." The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were true, they weren't, but because people believed him. Every time he belittled me, the room seemed to accept it as fact. My eyes stung, but I refused to let them water. "This could save the company," I whispered. Mark scoffed. "The company doesn't need saving from you. It needs real strategy. Now sit down and let adults work." I stood there unable to move, not because I was defeated, but because something inside me cracked open. A realization I should have had months ago. Mark wasn't just dismissing me. He was afraid of me. Every time I tried to contribute, even a small idea, He shut it down with a fury that went beyond annoyance. It wasn't my lack of experience. It wasn't my job title. It was the threat he felt when I stepped even an inch outside the box he had shoved me into. Because if I proved myself capable, his authority, his control, his comfort would all be at risk. That realization didn't soothe the sting of his words, but it sharpened my focus. Mark resumed the meeting, waving me away like an insect, and like everyone else, I stood quietly against the wall. But inside, I had already made my decision. If no one here would listen, then I would take my solutions somewhere they had to. That night, when the office emptied and the lights dimmed, I stayed behind with my laptop. I opened my project, my 42-slide presentation full of data, models, charts, and solutions. For the first time, I wasn't nervous. I was certain. Mark had made one mistake today. He thought dismissing me again would defeat me. Instead, it pushed me into action. By the time the clock blinked past midnight, I knew exactly what I would do next. And Horizon Tech? Well, they had no idea what was coming. By the time the last person left the building, the office felt like a husk. Quiet, dim, stripped of its daytime energy. Only the glow of emergency lights and the hum of the HVAC system kept it from feeling abandoned. Most evenings, I would have gone home exhausted, too drained to do anything but collapse. But tonight, I wasn't tired. I was electric. Mark's final dismissal still rang in my ears, but not as defeat, as fuel. He had silenced me in front of the department, mocked me in front of everyone, told me I wasn't part of the real work. And maybe the old version of me, the girl sorting files and hoping someone might someday see her potential, would have believed him. But not tonight. Tonight I had proof in my hands. A full, polished, airtight solution. I opened my laptop, the soft glow illuminating the empty cubicles around me. My presentation was already queued up, each slide carefully arranged, every figure double-checked. I had spent hours refining the data model earlier in the evening, smoothing the performance curve and tightening the workflow simulation. Now, the plan practically pulsed off the screen. The Horizon Tech Recovery and Optimization Framework wasn't just a good idea anymore. It was a lifeline. I transferred the entire folder, presentation, datasets, risk analyses, and model outputs into a master file. Then I logged into the internal executive board portal, the same system used for high-level proposals and confidential submissions. Most employees never even accessed it. Mark certainly never allowed anyone from his team near it. But I had been watching for months, listening, learning. I typed slowly, carefully, making sure there were no mistakes. Submit. Internal Strategic Emergency Document name, Anonymous Department. Unlisted description. Immediate Resolution Framework for Client Data Crisis and Long-Term Structural Stabilization. My finger hovered over the Enter key. A small voice inside me whispered, "Are you sure? What if this backfired? What if the board dismissed it? What if Mark found out and made things worse?" But then another voice, the one shaped by humiliation and study and long nights of quiet determination, said, "This is your moment. Take it." I pressed Enter. The system processed for a long second that felt like a century. Then, submission received. Just like that, the plan that had lived only in my computer and my imagination was placed in the hands of the highest leaders at Horizon Tech. People who could listen. People who would listen. My heart beat hard in my chest, but not with fear, with relief, with certainty. I wasn't done yet, though. A solution was only as good as its details. I opened the framework again, triple-checking each calculation. I fixed a small inconsistency in the logistics graph, cleaned up the formatting on 3 slides, reran the model with a different sensitivity parameter just to be safe. Hours passed. Midnight became 1. 1 became 2. Outside, Chicago's lights glowed faintly through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The streets were quiet. The world seemed paused, just for me. At 2:37 a.m., I leaned back in my chair, stretching my stiff shoulders. My neck ached. My eyes burned. But a deep, steady calm settled through my body. I wasn't invisible right now. No one was watching me. No one was interrupting me. No one was telling me I wasn't qualified. I was simply doing the work I knew I was born to do. Before shutting down my laptop, I performed one last check, the contact list. I had spent weeks compiling a roster of partner reps, vendor contacts, and industry specialists who handled emergency data recovery services. I sent a series of precise professional emails requesting updated documentation and clarifications on their protocols. Nothing suspicious, nothing revealing, just subtle nudges that would help finalize the model. Then I crafted a polished summary and attached it to the internal submission. Finally, I closed the laptop. The office felt different now, lighter, almost peaceful. Papers lay scattered across desks like abandoned thoughts. The printers rested in silence. Mark's office door was closed, his glass walls reflecting only my silhouette. I walked toward the exit slowly, taking in the eerie calm. The same office that had swallowed me whole, that had dismissed me, belittled me, ignored me. It suddenly felt smaller, like it no longer had control over me. Because tonight, quietly and unseen, I had changed everything. As the elevator descended, I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Tomorrow, the company would wake to a crisis, but they would also wake to a solution. They just didn't know yet that the girl who sorted files and unjammed the shredder had handed it to them on a silver platter, and they didn't know the most important part. I didn't want credit. Not yet. Tonight wasn't about glory. It was about proving something important. Not to them, but to myself. That I was capable of brilliance, even if no one believed it. That I could save a company, even if no one saw me. And tomorrow, the invisible girl would change the future. No one knew why headquarters was coming. The rumor began as a whisper near the elevators, then spread across the floor like wildfire. By 9 a.m., everyone was wide-eyed, panicked, and pretending not to be. Horizon Tech's New York executives never visited Chicago unless the situation was severe, catastrophic even. By 10, the entire department was buzzing. Mark strutted around with an anxious energy, adjusting his tie every 30 seconds, snapping at anyone who walked too slowly. He kept wiping his forehead with the back of his hand, though the office wasn't warm. I sat at my desk sorting papers, trying not to smile. I had seen the early morning memos. The board had reviewed the anonymous submission at sunrise. They had labeled it critical directive material. They had scheduled an emergency in-person visit. They had called it the only actionable solution. But no one knew who had submitted it. Not yet. The office grew louder as a small entourage approached. 3 executives from New York, accompanied by 2 Chicago board members. Sharp suits, polished shoes, expressions carved from stone. They didn't look stressed. They looked determined. The crowd parted like water as they entered the main conference room. Mark rushed forward, smiling too aggressively. "Welcome, welcome. I'm Mark Sullivan, departmental lead. We've been working tirelessly. We'll speak to the department shortly," one executive said flatly, brushing past him. Mark froze mid-gesture. His smile faltered, but he recovered quickly, following them like a shadow, trying desperately not to be stepped on. The rest of us gathered outside, curiosity battling fear in our expressions. At 11, the conference room doors opened. "Everyone inside," an executive announced. We filed in. I stood near the back, my heart pounding steadily, not with fear, but with an unfamiliar, thrilling certainty. 5 executives stood at the front of the room. Their presence alone silenced the entire department. The lead executive, a tall woman with sharp eyes, spoke first. "In the midst of the crisis with Trident, we received an anonymous submission through the board channel." She paused. This submission identified the root of the problem, provided a complete data recovery pathway, and proposed a long-term structural rebuild that not only fixes our current collapse, but prevents future ones. A ripple of shock moved through the room. My pulse quickened. She continued, "We want to be very clear. This project didn't come from any senior division." Her gaze drifted across the room. "It didn't come from management or analytics or the strategic operations team." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "This project," she said, "came from someone who saw what the rest of the company missed. Someone who understood the patterns better than the people paid to study them." Whispers erupted. People glanced at one another in confusion. I held my breath. "We are here today," she said, "because we want to know one thing." She looked directly at the crowd. "Who created the Horizon Tech Recovery and Optimization Framework?" Silence swallowed the room whole. People looked around, confused, stunned. Someone whispered, "Who even had access to the board portal?" Another murmured, "It had to be someone high level." Heads turned toward the senior analysts, the department managers, even the assistant directors. No one considered me. No one even glanced my way. Mark stepped forward slightly, as if preparing to take credit. "I'm sure my team would be happy." But something inside me clicked. For months, I had been invisible, laughed at, belittled, ignored. I had worked in silence, studied in silence, built solutions in silence. Not today. My hand rose before I even realized it. At first, no one noticed. Then a junior analyst saw me and frowned, then another, and another. Gradually, a wave of stunned faces turned toward the back corner of the room. I stepped forward. It was me. My voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The quiet in the room amplified it more than a shout ever could. Dozens of eyes widened. Someone whispered, "Emily?" Mark spun around, eyes wild. "What are you doing?" he hissed. I ignored him. I walked to the front of the room, legs steady, heartbeat calm. The executives watched me with something between curiosity and respect. "I created the framework," I said. "Everything in the submission was my work." The lead executive raised an eyebrow. "Your name wasn't listed." "I submitted anonymously," I said, "because I didn't think anyone here would take me seriously if they knew." The room shifted uncomfortably. Mark stepped forward, flustered and furious. "This is ridiculous. She doesn't have the qualifications. She doesn't understand high-level strategy. Actually," the lead executive cut in, "she understands it better than most of your team." Mark's mouth snapped shut. She turned back to me. "You built all 42 slides?" "Yes." "The data model, the risk-adjusted forecast?" "Yes." "The structural rebuild?" I nodded. "Every part." Silence again, this time deeper, heavier, filled with disbelief and something else, awe. Behind me, whispers spread like wildfire. "She built it? How did she even know how? Is this the same Emily who sorts the old files? I didn't even know she could do analytics." Mark sputtered, desperate. "This is absurd. She's lying. She's—" One executive held up a tablet. We reviewed the metadata, every file, every edit, every timestamp. They all come from one account. He turned the screen toward the crowd. My name was displayed clearly in the metadata trail. Gasps echoed. I felt something unfamiliar swell inside my chest. Something warm, powerful, grounding. Recognition. Real recognition. The lead executive smiled, just slightly. Emily Carter, we owe you our thanks. The entire room stared at me. For the first time, they really saw me. For a long moment, no one moved. The conference room felt suspended in time, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I stood in front of the executives, the entire department behind me, and for the first time since my first day at Horizon Tech, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. The lead executive stepped closer, her gaze steady and unreadable. Emily Carter, she said, we've been reviewing your framework since before dawn. It is the most comprehensive emergency proposal we've received in years. It not only solved the Trident crisis, it exposed structural issues we had overlooked at the corporate level. A stunned silence swept through the room. I swallowed. I'm glad it helped. It didn't just help, she corrected. It saved Horizon Tech. Her words sank in slowly, like sunlight spreading across cold ground. I expected pride to flood me, relief, triumph, something bright and overwhelming. But instead, what I felt was steadier, like the sensation of finally standing on solid ground after months of stumbling through fog. Behind us, Mark tried to speak. There must be some misunderstanding. The executive didn't even turn her head. Mr. Sullivan, we'll address your role momentarily. He froze, his face drained of color. She motioned toward the long table. Please, everyone sit. We obeyed, except for Mark, who remained standing, throat bobbing nervously. The executives took their seats at the front, and once the room settled, the lead executive continued. For months, she said, this department has been underperforming. Communication failures, missing reports, inconsistent data practices, poor leadership. Her eyes flicked briefly to Mark. We assumed the issues were systemic, that the work itself was overwhelming the team. A cold dread washed across the room. But it wasn't the system failing, she said. It was the management. Every head slowly turned toward Mark. He opened his mouth, but only a faint breath escaped. The executive continued mercilessly. The anonymous submission included a revision history. It showed your team consistently generated incomplete or outdated reports. It documented ignored warnings, and it highlighted that key responsibilities were routinely delegated to employees untrained for them. I can explain, Mark stammered. Please do, she said, folding her hands. Explain how someone in your department, an entry-level employee, managed to analyze and repair flaws you were supposed to oversee. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted toward me, burning with a mixture of panic and something darker, desperation. She went behind the chain of command, he said, pointing at me. She bypassed me. The executive raised an eyebrow. You mean she did your job? Mark's mouth fell open. A ripple of low whispers filled the room. For months, she added, Ms. Carter has demonstrated initiative and advanced analytical thinking while being assigned tasks that had nothing to do with her role. A murmur of realization passed through the team. Several co-workers lowered their eyes, guilt ghosting across their faces. Mark tried again. She's lying. She's manipulating all of you. We verified the metadata, the executive said calmly, and we interviewed her listed references this morning. We also compared her analysis to the internal metrics your division failed to address. Then her voice hardened. You dismissed her. publicly, repeatedly. And when she attempted to present critical information during the crisis, you humiliated her. Mark flinched. And for that reason, she said, effective immediately, Mark Sullivan is terminated from Horizon Tech for incompetence, negligence, and obstruction of strategic operations. The room gasped. Mark's face went scarlet, then pale, then scarlet again. He looked around wildly, as if hoping someone, anyone, might protest. No one did. Security was called. He sputtered incoherently as they escorted him out, his footsteps echoing down the hall like the fading remnants of an old, poisonous shadow. When the door finally shut behind him, the room exhaled in unison. The executive turned back to me. "Emily Carter," she said, her tone shifting from stern to warm. "Your work was extraordinary. You demonstrated insight far beyond your position and experience. You showed initiative, perseverance, and exceptional strategic intelligence." I felt my breath catch. "We want to place you where your talent can actually be used," she continued. "Effective immediately, you'll become the new head of this division." Gasps erupted. Someone dropped a pen. A few people stared at me like I'd turned into a myth. Others smiled, small, supportive, apologetic smiles, as if they were only now realizing how wrong they had been. My legs felt suddenly weightless. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," she replied with a smile. "You've earned this." I nodded slowly, then with growing confidence. "Yes, I accept." Applause filled the room, soft at first, then louder, until the sound surrounded me entirely. A warmth spread through me, settling into every part of my body. For months, I had walked into this office feeling invisible, and now I stood in the center of it, seen by everyone. Not because I fought for attention, but because I fought for myself. Later, when the executives finished outlining next steps and the team began to disperse, several coworkers approached me. Some offered congratulations. Others apologized quietly, admitting they hadn't noticed what I had been enduring. I appreciated them, but I didn't need their validation. The only validation I needed was my own. As I stood in front of the conference room window, watching the Chicago skyline glint against the afternoon light, a simple truth crystallized inside me. Being invisible had been my beginning, not my fate. I had stepped out of the shadows on my own terms, and now, for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely seen.